I'm calling the Washington County Finance and Budget Committee meeting to order for the October 2022. I have asked J.P. Johnson to do our prayer and pledge this evening. J.P. Johnson.
Are we on? Are we live? Let's bow our heads. Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for loving us. We thank you for blessing us. We thank you that we live in this country where we can participate in the government of this people. And we ask tonight that you give us wisdom in addition to our knowledge. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, J.P. Johnson. We'll now take up adoption of the agenda. J.P. Duncan.
I move to make an amendment to the agenda to add discussion of continued funding for Returning Home Center to the new business as the new item number 8 on the agenda.
I have a motion by J.P. Duncan to add a discussion item as the new item number 8 for continued funding of Returning Home Program. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. Returning home discussion will become new item number 8 under the first item under new business. Any other amendments? I'd take a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move to adopt.
I have a motion to adopt the agenda by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Ussery. All those in favor? Those opposed? The agenda has been adopted. Move on to monthly reports. Treasurer Hill could not be with us this evening. He sends his regrets for his unexpected absence. The report is in the packet, and he invites anyone to send questions or comments to him, and he'll try to get back as quickly as he can. With that, we're going to move on to the employee's insurance report, and Mr. Angel, if he's here. Good evening, Mr. Angel. Good. If you would, hit the little man on the microphone there.
How's that?
That's great.
Perfect. Okay, I'll make it brief. We had a pretty uneventful month. We were at $435,335 of total cost. Prior year was $408,581, so fairly close. We're able to keep our reserve balance still over $3 million. We're down $12,000 from the $3,060,000 we were at last year. We landed right at $3,048,000 this year. So still pretty tight and keeping it above the $3 million, but I was pleased that claims continue to level off and we were able to keep that number up. I do expect that we will have a large October and November, as we traditionally do, tapering off again in December. Usually we see a lower month in December, even though deductibles have been hit, holidays, things like that. Sometimes the procedural number goes down in December. So I'm hopeful that we will continue this trend and be above $3 million when the year ends.
Thank you, sir. Questions for Mr. Angel? Thank you for being here, sir.
Yes, sir.
With that, we'll move on to the comptroller's report. Ms. Hinkle, how are you this evening?
Okay. So on 6.1, we have the summary of statement operations by department. We should be around 75% at the end of September. Any questions or concerns? No.
Any questions for Ms. Hinkle?
Okay. And then 6.2 is the unappropriated reserve balance report, and there's not much to talk about on that one either. Is there any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. So we're back to our item of unfinished business, which is the ordinance establishing the Washington County annual budget for fiscal calendar year 2023. The way I'd like to see this work this evening, let's continue our journey and make sure there's no more amendments that need to be made from our spending summary, which was page 12. And then we also are going to have a presentation and talk about our compensation administration package that's been worked on and talked about. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys. We're working off pages 12 and 13. Last month, we made some additions to the spending out of the requested capital and personnel. Are there any other amendments or motions with that this evening? JP Ussery's having trouble with his microphone. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that in the interim here. Or... JP Ussery?
Yes, thank you very much. My understanding was there was a change in the coroner's request for capital expenditures. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I believe he had, I don't have that updated budget sheet in front of me, but I believe what he had done was cut that down to 100,000, and he was also going to update his maintenance a little bit, but I don't have that updated sheet. Does anybody, I don't remember seeing an updated sheet from the coroner. Is that correct?
You're talking about regards to the email that he sent?
Yeah, he was going to update his, he had volunteered to update his vehicle purchases. And I can't remember exactly what that entailed. Does anybody have the details on that?
I'll see if I can find the email because I think that's where he laid it out.
Okay.
And okay, thank you. And then my question is, what are remaining on the capital expenditures that we need to look at that we have not passed yet? I just want to make sure I'm on the right page here.
Well, it'll probably be simpler for us to go through the things that we approved.
Okay.
So far, we have had, last month, we approved the $30,000 for the security room in the courthouse. The planning department was approved for one new vehicle purchase at $35,000. The IT department was approved for $30,794 for universal power supply. We had approved the collector's request for the remodel of the Springdale office. The Veterans Affairs basement rebuild was approved for $60,000. We approved the additional offices for the public defenders for $30,000, and we approved the requested vehicle purchases for the road department.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, what about the, has there been a revision on what the jail operations were asking for?
We have taken no action on that at this time.
Has there been anything come from them as far as we asked them to change? There's been no?
I've had nothing reported to me.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let's switch gears then. Let's if we're ready, let's go ahead and talk about the salary administration. I think there's some big numbers here that we might need to factor in more on our thinking, and we'll wait for that report on the coroners. I apologize not having my email in front of me for that. So with that, Ms. Burchett and our IT director, Mr. Sidney, I think what will happen if you guys will probably start from the top and work down to what the goals were and what you've done. I think starting from square one would help us tonight to just wrap our heads around it. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to start by saying the preparation of the proposal you see tonight began in June. Since last month's meeting, we were asked to determine what a 4% COLA would look like, since that is what Benton County is considering for their 2023 salaries. The original proposal included a 2.2 COLA and an average of an 8.6 catch-up adjustment to match our employees to the pay ranges at Benton County. In order to apply a 4% COLA to all employees, we adjusted each position individually to its counterpart to Benton County based on their 2022 salary ranges. The method we used to determine comparable rates to Benton County was done one of three ways. First, if the position could be directly compared to one in existence with Benton County, the position was placed within Benton County's 2022 pay grade. Second, if the position was compared to Benton County and was lower in our current structure, we moved or aligned the position accordingly with Benton County's grade. Thirdly, if the position was different or did not have a direct match, we used the structure comparison method. For example, if you were a grade 6, that correlated to a grade 3 in Benton County's 2022 structure. From there, we then applied a 4% COLA adjustment to Benton County's 2022 structure. Following this, we then looked at the difference between each grade to pinpoint any structure compression. There was structure compression in the following grades, 3 and 18 through 20. The values that we used for grade 3, there was an adjustment figure included in that, and that was $300. In 18 to 20, it was $600. So it was the 4%, and then we added $600 to the formula to fix the compression issue in the structure. The result is what is being presented tonight. Carrying out this process helped to accomplish many things, such as helping to bring us up to market with Benton County, and we were able to fix some of our compression issues within some departments. The variance for each current employee was then calculated into the individual's final salary so that they did not lose any previous merit, longevity, or prior COLAs they may have earned. Included within the final figures are all vacant positions being budgeted at the midpoint for their grade, which will allow elected officials to recruit competitively within the market for the new talent. This is something that was not originally included in the calculations last month. The resulting numbers are an overall decrease of $246,000 approximately to the general fund, and an overall decrease of approximately $355,951. It was approximately $300,000 to budget all vacant positions to the midpoint. This equates percentage-wise to an overall decrease of 0.31% from the original numbers that were presented last month.
Can I stop you right there? Can you rewind about 10 seconds? Because I think all those stats are very important for us. Can you walk through those a little bit slower?
That whole last, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think those are answering a lot of our questions, and I just want to make sure we have time to take note.
Okay. The resulting numbers are an overall decrease of approximately $246,000 to general fund, and an overall decrease of $355,951. It was approximately $300,000 to budget all vacant positions to the midpoint. And this equates to an overall percentage decrease of 0.31% from what was presented last month. Okay? All right.
I would like to explain how we made the comps with Benton County. First, I compared each position title with Benton County where there were exact matches. Anywhere I needed more information, I reached out to the HR director at Benton County. I then moved our matched positions to the same pay ranges as their counterparts in Benton County based on Benton County's 2022 salary ranges. Then added a 4% COLA to the pay ranges for 2023. For any position where there was not an exact match in Benton County, we moved them into Benton County's pay range based on where their positions were in our current structure. For example, if a chief deputy was 2 grades higher than a supervisor that reported to them, and we found an exact match in Benton County for the chief deputy and not the supervisor, we would move the chief deputy into the same salary range as Benton County, and the supervisor would be 2 grades lower. This was done to match our pay scale to Benton County and to keep the organizational structure and hierarchy as we already had that was based on work done by the Johansson Group and our JSAP and personnel committees. Afterwards, we sent comps out to elected officials and department heads last Friday, and a few of them wanted us to take a closer look at comparable positions in Benton County and provided additional input and information, and we made some adjustments. I will be presenting them here tonight as an amendment. I have heard that there are some others that have concerns about the comps and haven't presented those concerns to me yet. I propose that the Finance Committee pass this proposal to the Quorum Court, and in the meantime, we meet with the few elected officials that want us to take another look at their comps. We will work with them and reach out directly to their counterparts in Benton County if needed, and we'll make adjustments where appropriate. I think that any time a comp is made, it is important to be open to looking at the comparisons closer if the subject matter experts feel we need to. From what I understand, there are just a few departments where they might want to look closer at the comps and provide more information. We're open to this, and I will have those amendments ready before the Quorum Court meeting. I would like to walk you all through the spreadsheets and a few examples. I think it'll help you kind of wrap your head around the methodology of how we prepared this. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions? Okay. So I'm going to start with the HR director position. And I'm going to show you Benton County's 2022 numbers. Actually, that's at the bottom. Okay. So their human resource director position, they have all these positions down here as non-graded, but they do have a pay range for them. So for this position specifically, it had a minimum, midpoint, and max. Okay, so if I come over to what we have presented here, these proposed ranges right here are those numbers. They correlate. This is the proposed min, mid, and max for that position directly to Benton County. These numbers next to it are the adjusted COLA range based on that 4%. And that is how we ended with the final value over here, in addition to that minimum distance being included, which is whatever that employee's distance is from their current minimum to their current pay rate. So we factored those in addition to that structure adjustment and that pay adjustment. Does that make sense?
JP Duncan.
Can you zoom in a little bit on
Sure.
that?
I'm not sure if you all can see. Sydney, how do I zoom in?
And then just so
Without messing
to make sure I'm clear while you do zoom in there. So you've got the 3 ranges that's from Benton County 2022 current pay band, and then you're adding 4% to each. So all 3 pay bands increase by 4%, and then the last number on the right-hand side, you're showing a discrepancy.
This one?
What's that number?
This or this? The red?
Yes.
The red?
The red.
Okay, the red is the final proposal for this employee.
Okay, and then the total change is going to be the dollar amount increase that they'll receive
Yes.
based on this current plan, and then is that a percent change?
This
next
is
to that?
their percent change also.
Okay. That's
overall.
helpful. So absolute change and then percent change.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I think it's important, I've understood it now through your discussions, but I think it's important to highlight that we couldn't directly compare grades with us in Benton County just because over the years our grade numbers had gotten off, right? They didn't match up. You couldn't lay them out, and then that's why you're relying on the dollar figures. Is that correct? The ranges.
Correct. That's why we had to go through 3 different methods of how we compared positions. Because if there was a direct counterpart at Benton County, we were able to see what their rate was for them.
Okay.
There were some that did not have that, so we did do a structure comparison because that was the only other option to do for those individuals. Does that make sense when I say that?
Define what structure comparison
Okay,
is.
so I'm going to show you right here, and I'm going to have to zoom out so you can see this, okay? So this is how, whenever I was explaining, like if you were a grade 6, these are our current structures right now at Washington County, 2022, okay? So we start with a grade 6 in our structure. Benton County's, this correlates to their grade 3. The positions that fall within this grade at Benton County are very similar to what fall in our grade 6, for the most part. And then over here, we just renumbered and made them sequential, the grades. I mean, these are pretty much superfluous numbers, how you grade your ranges, okay? It could say SS, it could say AA. So I think this was kind of throwing some people off too because we regraded them. But if you're grade 6, you would be grade 3 for Benton County. At the 4% adjustment, you're here in a grade 1 in our new structure. So that is what the structure comparison means. Does that make sense now?
I think so. JP Duncan?
So they gave you data and you're able to walk through by position and you made sense of it all. So you're saying even though we call it a 6, it's a 3 there, really no difference in the actual function and role itself.
It's the salary ranges that we compare to.
Okay.
The actual dollar figures,
Okay.
and not the tag they assigned them.
Okay.
Yeah. So this right here, this spreadsheet that you're seeing is Benton County. I got this directly from Benton County. This is their spreadsheet for their 2022 figures. And all I did was I filtered. So I'm going to move on to another example. Let's look at, okay. So I'm going to use the Deputy Assessor 3 as an example position. So in Benton County, they are in a grade 8 for their structure right here. Can you all see that? Okay. So with our proposal, what we did with them, let me go back over here. So it doesn't matter which one I use because they're all about very similar. So currently in our pay structure, a Deputy Assessor 3 is rated at a grade 13, okay? So based on what we did, we were trying to compare to Benton County. So over here, if you look at where a 13 is, that's here. So if you're doing a structure comparison for the position, they would be an 8, okay? But a 10 in Benton County's 2022 figures. Okay, we just saw that at Benton County, a deputy assessor right now in 2022 is rated at an 8. So this position is already rated 2 grades higher than what Benton County, the counterpart, is. So what we did with this position, those positions that were in that case, is we dialed them back and made them compared based on what the judge requested. We put them back in comparison with Benton County. Does that make sense? Because we were trying to do a structure comparison with Benton County by position title. And so in order to accomplish that, we used Benton County spreadsheet and we correlated that based on that. Instead of, in some cases, where we said, okay, if you're a 13, you're now going to be an 8.
we were actually able to get the true data from Benton County to do that comparison for these individuals. Does that make sense?
In that example, walk us through the same math, adding the 4%. So obviously there's a difference in the band, but then what would it look like under this proposed schedule?
Okay, so these are actually the numbers that you have before you.
I can't see that.
I'm sorry, let me scroll.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so this particular example, this person's final pay would be this, the $37,920, and they're getting, it's a $5,600 approximately increase dollar-wise, and 14.87% increase from where they are right now. So that's how that computes to that.
Okay.
Do you need me to leave that up there, or are you good with that one?
No, I'm fine with that one. I'm just, obviously, remind me the total dollar amount on this revised proposal.
The revised proposal? Okay.
Because there's some significant percent changes from a...
So there's 355,951 decrease with an additional, the 300,000 that wasn't originally figured in for the vacant positions, budgeting them to the midpoint, that ate up 300,000. So if you add that plus the 355, you're at 655,951. That's the total decrease. But because we went back in and budgeted vacant positions at the midpoint, it did take up about $300,000 in order to accomplish that. And that is in reference to support the controls that were presented along with this, giving electeds the ability to negotiate in the market.
I like the midpoint idea. Dumb it down for me. 22 versus 23. How much total dollars is 23 larger than 22? Because the 655, that's a decrease, and then we went back up because we took to the midpoint. Am I missing something?
You just want to know the total?
I want to know the absolute dollar change.
The total sum?
Yes.
Okay.
The difference. So the sum of 23 minus the sum of 22.
I don't know if I have 22 figures in front
What
of me.
does this package cost?
Yeah.
If we were to implement this, what is the bottom line figure?
Because the two examples I've seen have been a 30-some-odd percent increase and a 15% increase. And I get we're doing a market correction, so there's going to be some significant changes.
Right.
But I'm going, man, how are we going to pay for this?
Right.
What's the total dollar
Right.
amount?
So on the personnel services, overall, it looks like there is a $53,303,299 is what is on your sheets from the comptrollers that they prepared based on these figures. That's a 55.53%. Is that correct? That's the percentage of increase. Like overall that is the percentage to budget personnel with this salary proposal included, in addition to roads and everyone for the county going into 2023. So I know you were asking for the difference. I don't have 2022 budget figures in front of me.
Okay. What you're saying is the total percentage of the total budget is personnel is 55%.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. That still doesn't help answer the question, though, what this cost us. I think that's what I'm getting down to is how are we going to pay for this? And what's the actual increase? Because in the past, we've gone, okay, we're going to do a 3% increase across the board. I don't like that, so I'm not, that's not my vote. We need to do that. But I do think we need to understand what we are voting on, if it's the actual increase, and then understand what is the tax revenue that's going to help cover that piece too. So, not to drill you here.
So, I have this other sheet over here. So it looks like on the revenue sheet that you all were provided, there is a $56 million, a little over $56 million in unappropriated.
So if you subtract the 53,303 from that, I think that that would probably give you the figure that you're looking for to see if we can afford it. Is that what you're asking?
The 1% or the dollar difference from last year. Is that correct?
Okay, yeah, I don't have 2022 figures in front of me. So we can get that if you need that. That's totally fine. We can get that. I just don't have that in front of me right now. I have a couple of other examples
JP
I'd like to
Duncan?
go over too.
No, that's good.
Okay, yeah, continue to walk through your examples, I think.
Okay, all right. So I also want to talk about the IT director, comptroller, and that methodology as well that we use for them. Okay, so as I'm sure you all well know, our comptroller position is vacant right now. And then our IT director, obviously, he's sitting right next to me. So with these positions, currently our IT director is in an ungraded situation. So this is a really good example because it shows how we handled the majority of our ungraded positions. So at Benton County, their IT director, where is it? I'm not seeing it. Oh, right here. Is in this pay range right here. Can you all see that, or do I need to zoom in? Whoa, that's a little far. Let me back up some. Okay. Okay, so this is the minimum, that's the max, and this is the midpoint for the technology director. So what we did on our study is we correlated this position to that to make it graded. And that resulted in, here's the proposed, which was the Benton County figures you just saw. And then once again, we took and added that 4%. So this is the 4% range for that position. And then we included that employee's minimum distance value, and it gave us the final proposed salary for that individual. Comptroller, we did the same thing. We correlated them with Benton County, which is what you see here. Same thing. Here's the new proposed at 4%. And with this one, because it's vacant, they are budgeted at their new midpoint after the COLA, which is that 121,398.65. Doesn't mean that person's going to make that coming in. It just gives that elected the ability to negotiate during the recruiting process. And it gives us the ability to advertise at that amount that we can negotiate up to. Depends on experience, education, what have you. Does all of that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay.
JP Duncan.
This may not work, but just a thought. If you have the absolute change in whatever that column is on the right, it's hidden now.
Yes, sir.
Column AB.
Yeah.
You might be able to sum AB up to understand the absolute change.
I see that now. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, no worries.
I needed some help with that. Okay, so. Wait. Hold on one second. I think I still have another filter on here somewhere. Maybe not. Okay. Okay. There we go. All right. There we go. So the sum is what you're looking for?
Yes.
Is 1.650293 and 38 cents.
Okay. So 1.65 million
Yeah.
is the increase. And then if you have the sum of the final proposed, and then is there so column AA, there's probably to the left somewhere the current comp, and maybe it may be hidden. But I'm just curious what a total absolute or a total percent change would be. So do the same calculation that's in
This
AC.
one, so AC, yeah.
But if you average it, it's going to
The average
be a
is
weighted average, and it won't make sense. You'll need to-
14.23%.
So the average pay increase in this plan is a 14%. It's going to cost the county 1.65 million. And that's to catch up to Benton County plus 4%. Okay. I'm looking at my colleagues on the court. That's it's not Excel, it's math, but it's this is a big ask. It sounds like we're way behind if we're pinning ourselves up against Benton County to be $1.6 million, and then on top of that, we've got to put in the 4% in addition to that. But
Well, and I don't want to, I don't think some of us are surprised by that,
no, we should.
that have sat and listened to the suggestions for several years now. Can I go back to one of your examples and ask a question? That deputy assessor 3 a while ago that you were just using as an example, it looked like they were basically graded as high as, I mean, they were actually overgraded compared to Benton County, right? But when you move that over, that person's still getting a 14% raise, right? I mean, it sounds like you've went through this job by job, description by description. I mean, you're getting a pretty good feel. Nobody has decreased, right?
No, no one has decreased. The only people who experienced a decrease from your initial proposal were ones who were originally had to be graded, like the HR director, comptroller, IT director, because we were able to place them at the market value for Benton County directly. So from last month's proposal, those values did decrease for those positions because they were already at that market value for Benton County's 2022. Like, that was a direct correlation for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it kind of does. And then my next question, I guess, is let's say I'm graded equivalent with Benton County, and now my position's a grade 10 or whatever the new nomenclature is. Are my years of service to the county be included in you guys' rubric for what my salary is now? I mean, this is taking both market and service time, right?
Yes, correct. That is what the Z column is. This Z column is what you just said. Their years of service, their merit, their COLA, all of that's being taken into account with this study. So they're not losing that with this. Any more questions before I move on? Okay. All right, so
Just a second. JP Johnson, did you have a question?
Can we go back? I'd like to see the screen that showed the 1.6 million and the number of folks and the percentages again.
sure. Is this what you're referring to?
Do those numbers include the vacant positions at the midpoint?
Yes.
Okay, so that's everybody, that's 256 positions total? Or 256 people plus some number of vacant positions?
Correct, and if you want the actual number of vacants, I mean, I can filter this and tell you how many vacant positions we have, okay? That is the total, yes, sir, that is the total. Okay.
JP Essery?
This is a really simple question, but we're matching Benton County. How do we know that that's where the market really is? I mean, if you can see what I'm saying, because we've got all these other that, you know, different departments have giving people different salaries to be competitive.
Right.
And they don't always line up with this. I'm trying to figure out, was there any kind of anything done to make sure that there was something besides just that one point?
Yes, so before we brought you our first proposal, we did speak with Blair Johansson, and let him look at the figures. And based on his analysis, the percentage of change and increase that we were proposing, he said that that was very close to the market change that is happening in the nation right now and for public sectors. He said that if he had prepared something, it would have probably been very close to what we were presenting the first go around. So he even had made the comment at one point, it could probably be slightly higher even to remain competitive. So we did do that. Now we did not, this is not, let me be clear, this is not a market study. This is a structure and pay comparison structure to Benton County, who is, from what I understand, our counterpart. So this is not a true market study, okay? This is to get us competitive with Benton County and to match what they're doing over there. If we want to look at a market study, that does take time and money, and we would need to do that probably going into the next fiscal year for 2024 budget is what I would think, to give us time to do that, because that is a very extensive process to go through 200 plus positions and carry out a market analysis on each of them individually. That also involves looking at and reevaluating all of our job descriptions, possibly having an outside consultant come in and assist with that. It is a very large project. And in order to get something before you all this year, there was not time to do that this year. So we went with a structure and pay comparison to Benton County to get us competitive with them, because I had been told that we were experiencing some vacancies because we had some employees going to Benton County. And so it was conveyed to me that they're higher than us. Why are they higher? Let's look at that. And so that's where we went with it. That's why what is proposed to you today, that was the methodology and the process behind that. Does that answer your question?
It answers my question to a degree, but I'm still with, statistically, if you only have one sample, your chances of being wrong in some areas are really, really high. I just want to make sure that we're all, I understand we had to start somewhere, but I also would think it would be very helpful to us if there were at least certain areas, particularly where people felt like that they weren't competitive. And then on the other side of the coin, if we're paying twice what we should be for those people, I'm just trying to rule out, make sure that we're as even as we can be. And then the other thing that's kind of come to my attention, that it seems like that all the departments don't seem to be quite evenly. Some people had huge changes, some people had very little changes. And I don't know if you could speak to that or not. I mean, for example, the assessor's office did not have a lot of change compared to the other ones.
Okay, so let's go to the assessor's office. I'm going to zoom out some if that's okay with you all so we can see this. Okay, so I'm going to use another example from this department and take you through an actual example. So let's look at a deputy assessor 2 position even. So over at Benton County, currently, let's already get there. So currently a deputy assessor 2 is at a 7 in their 2022 structure, okay? For us, they're in a 12. when you come over here to this screen, these are our side-by-side comparisons of our structures that we've been working off of. So with a 12, our current 12, in this new calculation, they would have been a 7, okay, if we just did a straight structure comparison, okay? However, we're trying to compare to Benton County. So with theirs, they're at a 7 right now. So Benton Counties are these center columns. So here is a 7 at Benton County. As you can see, if we did a structure comparison, that position would be 2 grades higher than our counterpart at Benton County. So we correlated with Benton County. So we made the new proposed for a deputy assessor 2. It turned into a 5 in the new structure, which is the 7 at Benton County right now with a 4%. Does that make sense, how we did that?
Let's look at the increase. For their department.
So as you can see over here to the far right, the AC column, this shows us the percentage of change of increase for these individuals. So the average increase for this department is a 12.87 increase. There are some individuals who are getting a smaller increase than others. This has to do also with this minimum distance value based on years of experience, COLA, merits they've received in the past. So, I mean, the formula, as far as that goes, is similar for everyone, the way that that was computed, this final value. Did that answer your question, or do I need to explain more? Sure. Okay. Okay. All right. I would like to talk about, do you all want to see one more example of a structure comparison? You do? Okay. All right. We're going to look at the circuit clerks. Okay. And we're going to look at the assistant. No, it's this one. We're going to look at the assistant bookkeeper criminal juvenile court position. Okay. Currently, that position is in a grade 12 in our current structure. Okay. So once again, I'm going to come over to Benton County. Oop, that's not the right one. It's collector. All right. All right. So the counterpart is in a grade 9 in Benton County's 2022. So when we come over here, here we have our current grade is a 12. And sorry, give me 1 second. Benton County's is a 9. So with this one, this is a good example because it is a direct correlation to our counterpart at Benton County. So this one is competitive in the sense that it falls within the structure comparison, okay? It's still behind, though, because this catch up to Benton County with their structure, as you can see, there is a difference there. And then we impose that 4%, and that's how we came up with a grade 7 for that position. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. I'm ready to talk about some amendments, unless you all have other questions and you want me to pull up a specific department or position and show you how we determined that position.
I have some questions, and I think
Okay.
before we move to amendments, I want to make sure all of our questions are answered. I'm going to open it up to other JPs, and I'm going to open it up to other elected officials, department heads, if they have questions about this. I want to try to address as much of this evening. So, one of the things I've been very critical of in our salary administration right now is it's every man or woman for themselves, right? And so what I see a lot of is a department head moving independently, keeping their people up. You know what I mean? Maybe they're being more diligent about it or more aggressive about it. And that's explained in this when you start comparing why some departments might have an average overall increase of more or less. Is that correct? Would that be what your take on this is?
That is correct. That is a very accurate statement.
Okay. So let's address somebody who I absolutely want to try to make this as equitable as possible. We have an opportunity here to do something really great for Washington County. But let's take an example of somebody, and I think you've kind of walked through it, but let's do it in generalities. Let's say I'm in a position that has been graded higher than Benton County, our counterpart in Benton County, right? What happens to me as an employee in this administration? Can you go through that one more time very generally? What is the consequence of this proposal to me as an individual?
So the consequence is your grade range. So you, depending on where your current pay is right now, based on that 4% and that adjustment ratio to Benton County's numbers, you may be at the top end more of your new pay structure, where you may experience a situation where if you continue to get increases and the structure remains the same, you would max out. In that situation, employees would experience a lump sum payment for the difference to keep them in their structure, but they would still get compensated at the end of the year in a lump sum payment for that difference, whatever it may be. This is why in the controls, it was recommended and asked that it be put in there that the structure itself will move 3% on either side to help maintain the structure and the fluidity of the program so that employees don't all end up being maxed out in the far future, okay? If you're talking about a new hire, and I'm not exactly sure why the consensus at Washington County, from what I understand, has always been to bring in at the minimum of a pay range. I'm not really sure where that came from. But it seems like there's been a trend of that over the years. And so if you are an individual who is at your minimum, what this does is you will remain at your minimum. However, you're elected, if the controls are passed, will have the opportunity going into 2024 to provide you with merit increases. You will be eligible for longevity increases based on your years of service with the county in your position. You will be eligible for performance increases based on your annual performance review. So overall, for the employee themselves, this program will aid in providing them and allowing them to experience increases on a more regular basis than what they've been accustomed to in the past. It will also allow electeds during the recruiting process to be able to have a little bit more fluidity in negotiating pay and being competitive when advertising in the market for talent. Does that answer your question, or did I go off in like
I think you're giving me additional information.
I'm sorry.
We need it. But I would not lose anything by this administration, right? And I would still be able to participate moving forward in raises, COLA adjustments,
Exactly.
grade adjustments.
Everyone is experiencing an increase in this study. Everyone.
Cover with me, cover with the group, because you have covered it with me. There's a beauty in this, not just in what we're doing for next year, but in the continuation of how we're going to do this in the future. And you've explained to me that we should always look at salaries and compensation in the county in 3 different buckets, right? Can you go over that with me? The first being range adjustments, the second being COLA adjustments, and the third being the merit adjustments that are provided for in the salary administration plan. Can you give the group a breakdown of that? Because I thought that was extremely beneficial when I was hearing it.
Correct. Okay, so whenever you're looking at a pay structure, what you first want to do is not look at your employees. You want to look at your structure. So if you're going to do an adjustment, let's just say a COLA adjustment, you're going to give that to your structure so that your structure takes care of that increase to your employees. Where you compensate your employees with that adjustment, stay with me. I know you're looking at me a little. You take into account that minimum distance value, which is what we've done here, okay? And you compute that in once you adjust your structure based on the COLA. So,
I'm sorry, pay ranges.
your pay range, excuse me.
Whenever you increase your COLA, you apply it to your pay ranges. That way, if somebody leaves the county and you hire somebody new, then they get the cost of living increase also.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you. I probably wasn't conveying that the right way. Okay, so that takes care of COLA. Merit is done to the individual because merit is based on their performance, what they accomplish on the job. Think that the majority of us maybe can agree that, not everyone should always get paid the same amount of money. That somebody who works hard produces more, and comes to work with a positive attitude and all of that, that should rate higher, and that their pay should reflect that. And so that's where merit comes in. That's what a merit increase is. And the way you do that is based on performance evaluations. And with the scoring rubric that is presented in the policy, that will help accomplish that. So that was COLA, merit, what was the third one?
I think I said the range adjustments. I might
Range,
have
well,
misspoke.
that's kind of
Yeah,
the COLA.
thing
It's
too.
the, yeah, so that's two really, because the range adjustments are taken care of by the COLA.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So longevity, within the policy controls, there is a rubric for longevity based on 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, and I believe 25 years of service. And there's a percentage of increase, recommended increase, tied to your years of service that would be computed within the budget figures for that next fiscal year for you.
J.P. Johnson.
Explain, I'm real slow, ma'am. When the ranges adjust at 3%, and I'm assuming they adjust up, does that change in itself change anybody's pay?
It will change people who are at the minimum or who are maxed out in their grade only. Does that make sense? Because you're shifting. So if you have somebody at a minimum and then your grade range just shifted 3%,
So-
they're going to get a 3% to stay in their pay range.
So people at either end of the range could see the increase.
Oh, let me back up. I'm sorry. I just thought the people at the top end will not, excuse me, because now they're at their max and it's just shifted out 3%. However, that will give that elected the opportunity and that employee the opportunity to earn that back through performance and through merit if the elected so chooses to provide that employee with the merit that year. Does that make sense? Sorry, I misspoke the first time.
Okay, I'm trying to, and I've read through the narrative and
Okay.
I'm still a little confused. So there's a possibility of getting an increase based on the changes in the range, the 3% number. And then there's a possibility of the rubric, that's a fancy.
Performance rubric. Yeah. That's okay.
There's an opportunity for them to get a raise there, and then there's an opportunity for a merit raise. But the quorum court's going to have to fund 2 of those 3 buckets, correct?
Yes. So once again, these are recommended amounts every year, and then the quorum court will make the decision on whether or not the amounts need to be dialed back on, or if we can't do the full, let's just say 3% COLA, and you all want to do just a 2% COLA to the structure. And then if somebody is being asked to be given, let's just say a 3% performance increase, and if the county can't afford it, the quorum court still, that authority still rests with the quorum court ultimately, and you all would be able to make, or whoever the body of power is at the time, would be able to make that decision and dial back on those figures if there's not money to pay for it. But it still gives the employees the opportunity to earn that based on the policy.
If you add all of these up and they compound, is the 3% change in the structure sustainable long-term? I mean, if we start adding, I'm with J.P. Duncan, I'm trying to figure out how you pay for all this long-term.
Right.
And maybe it works, I don't know.
Right. So once again, that will shift depending on the fluctuation of your workforce. I would hope that if this was to pass, we wouldn't experience a lot of turnover. Is that feasible? Probably not, but it would allow us to be able to hopefully retain our talent that we do have. So if you have people who've been with the county long-term, it may compound in those situations, yes. Do I have a figure for you? No, I can't predict the future financially. I also have no way of predicting what Washington County's revenue will look like in the future. That's why that decision ultimately will still rest with the quorum court and how the money is allocated and dispersed at that point in time. You're welcome.
And, a big change like this isn't without questions or debate on the wisdom of it or how we're moving forward. But I want you to address, what we've heard are people saying, well, let's just do a flat increase. Let's take our breath on this. Let's not necessarily move comparatively. Let's do another flat increase. What do you see in our system currently that you're critical of, and what do you see, would that benefit or hurt us to do that in terms of our current system? Can you expound upon that from your experience a little bit?
I definitely can. I do not want to knock what the quorum court passed for 2022 because it was wonderful that what you all did for the structure. But there was a 10%, and this is a good example of what you're asking me to explain, a real world example. So if we just did an overall, let's say 5% increase, COLA, to the structure, that's very similar to what we did for 2022. We did a 10%. When we did that, the minimum distance value for employees was not taken into account. So what occurred is a lot of employees got a 10%. There were some who only got a 3.5%. There were some who were able to get a 5% because of our current salary administration program and the rules within it that say whenever a position is regraded 2 grades higher, an elected can ask and recommend for a 5% increase for that employee. So whenever you allow that to happen, you're adding to the issue of compression in your structure because you have positions moving around, you have, you're not changing your structure and making it competitive with a market, whether it be a Benton County comparison or a true market. You're just adding that lump 8%. Does that answer it, or do I need to keep going?
I mean, I think that's good.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have the experience on this body as some of my colleagues do. But I will say that listening to the Johansson group, when they've come in here every year and some other things, they were basically saying, if I were to paraphrase, a flat increase is about the easiest thing we can do to get by.
Pretty much. That is
And-
that is true, yeah.
Yeah. And I really want to say that we have compounded that problem over years, out of revenue concerns or something, and we have the opportunity here to do something very dynamic. And listen, I might have been more critical of this in the past, but I think we've done something dynamic at the detention center, and we've done something dynamic at the road department, and I don't know that those results don't speak for themselves. So I'm getting up, in advocacy here, and I don't want to do that. So, questions by the body here. Any questions? I want to invite any of the other JPs up here. I know this is very condensed, and I want us to take our time this evening and work through this as much as possible. If any of you guys have any questions or comments here. No, you guys stay there.
Okay. I was hoping so they could talk.
I saw the smiles on your faces. You thought it was over.
No, I know we still have to talk about amendments.
All right.
It's not over till it's over.
JP Madison.
Thank you. So when you did the comparison to Benton County, it sounds to me like it was a title comparison, and that there's not really a way to know that the jobs are the same.
Unless we specifically take time and get all of Benton County's job descriptions and tie that to and compare it to our current job descriptions. No, there's not.
Okay.
Other than making a phone call to the HR director over there and having that discussion with her, which I've done in some instances.
Because, I mean, obviously, with the benefit of time, we would have done a job analysis for each job,
Right.
which would be effectively saying, okay, this position in Washington County is the same as this position in Benton County. So this is based off of just sort of an assumption that job titles make for the same job.
Not overall.
Wow.
No, ma'am. I'm going to use my own position because I know what an HR director does. So I know that my position's grade over at Benton County, the counterpart, is a direct correlation because of the nature and the structure of that department. Our IT director used to work for Benton County, and he worked there for 14 years. And so he knows a lot about hands-on, the structure and what people do over there. He still has contacts over there that we reached out to and discussed where we had concerns of a direct comparison in job duties. It's not an exact science because, once again, it's not a market study. It is a structure comparison and a title comparison with Benton County.
Well, so I guess my concern is it's not been a market study. It's not been a job analysis. It's been, I mean, surely there's going to be certain positions where I think you could say they're the same, but even an IT director who has the exact same job, it might be the job analysis might be different if that person supervises 12 people versus 6.
That is correct.
And so to say that, I mean, I think for lack of a better understanding, Benton County's the best we've got is the way that is what we've been able to say because of this trying to do this in a hurry, it seems to me. And that's what concerns me because I'm all for giving folks more money, but the proper way to do it is to do a market study, to do a job analysis, and then make sure that the titles, it's not just a title comparison. That's what concerns me. And then I want to ask a couple other questions. So why, you said that you didn't understand why we brought people in at the minimum. And then that makes me ask, well, why do we have a minimum? What's the purpose of a minimum if we don't bring people in at it?
The purpose of a minimum is to say, as an entity, this is what you believe is the starting range for a position. It doesn't necessarily mean that is the pay for the individual that you have recruited, because upon recruiting, you're taking into account years of experience, applicable,
Sure.
knowledge, certificates, education, and from what I can see, that hasn't always been done in the past in all situations at Washington County.
So does that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, it's become the norm, it seems like, from what I've seen since being here.
The norm is to bring them in at the minimum, because that's how the budget has always been prepared as well.
Well, and I guess that's what, one of the things you said too was that, I don't remember what position you were talking about, but you said that we would budget at the midpoint and advertise at the midpoint. But I would almost think you'd want to advertise the range, because the candidate you select could go anywhere within that
Yes,
range.
ma'am, that's what I meant. I'm sorry
Okay.
if I didn't say that right. You would have the ability to, you're still going to advertise for the whole range.
Okay.
Okay. But the elected official will know I'm budgeted already for the midpoint. So I have the money in my budget. So I don't have to go back through JSAP, personnel, finance and budget, and then on to Quorum Court to get more money allocated mid-year if I find and recruit somebody that I need to be able to pay them more because of their experience or anything like that, which is what we've been doing now.
Well, and I guess that's very good to know about advertising the range. I guess then that leads me to another issue, because I guess I would want to be assured that to get a person who's coming in from the minimum to somewhere higher, that there is a structure for that, to say that does this system build into the midpoint max, like with this more service or this more certificates or something, we're going to bump you up. Because I don't want there to be, I'm an employment lawyer, so I don't want there to be a lot of discretion in how you get from mid to mid to max. And so with all due respect to our elected officials, they're probably not, legally or HR trained to say, well, I want to bring this person in at the midpoint because I think they've got a great deal of experience, but then there's no comparison to, is that what someone else in a similar decision that was made in the county? I'm sort of ultimately going toward that pay equity. And part of that's why a lot of states in some cities are saying you can't ask people about their salary history, right? Because salary history typically has with it elements of discrimination. And so if somebody who's a skilled negotiator happens to convince whoever is their hiring manager to come in at the mid, but then someone who doesn't ask comes in at the min, how are we making sure that there's some objective components to getting from min to mid? Is there any part of that in this?
So I would say that the objective components that would be taken into account are based on the applicant's resume and prior years of experience and different certifications that they can prove to that elected official. This is allowing the elected official to have a little bit more fluidity and flexibility in that recruiting process. Yes, there is room, I think is what you're alluding to. There's room for it to be abused. However, they cannot go above the midpoint without coming through committees after that. So there is still some discretion. It's not like they're going to be able to jump somebody up to their maximum level.
But
they have a 20% negotiation range from their minimum up, which really is to the midpoint.
Well, but 5% can create a pay gap that's statistically significant. And so that's what worries me, is because what I could see, it looked like the pay ranges are much bigger in what this is proposed. Because you've got, like, just looking at the assistant IT director right there, there's a $30,000 difference between min and max. So midpoint, from min to midpoint, is $15,000. That's a significant amount of money to suddenly say, well, there's unchecked discretion on that. I guess I would feel better is to say, like when we went through the process where certain individuals came forward and said they gained this additional certification, you got $500, right? So there's an objective component tied to the dollar value. And so I guess that's where, to get from the min to the mid, I would say, okay, well, if you come in with 0 to 2 years of experience, you're going to be at the min. 2 to 5, we're going to be a percentage in. I would rather see some sort of truly objective structure to that, because I'm just concerned that we've seen how hard it is to hire people. Somebody's like, well, this is the first person that's come along, that's willing to take this job, so I'm going to give them the midpoint without any consideration for how that person stacks up to like an incumbent. right? So if you then created a problem because you've got somebody who's an incumbent who's closer to the minimum, and now this new person comes in, which is obviously a problem. Is anybody who studies pay equity knows that longevity is not always financially rewarding, and in fact, it frequently isn't. The longer you're here anywhere, it's not unique to Washington County, it's anywhere, you're generally paid less because the people who come in new do the negotiating or do the whatever, and they get. So that I'm concerned about there being much broader pay ranges with that kind of unchecked discretion where we're being asked as the quorum court to give the elected officials the midpoint. I mean, I'm not saying we couldn't give them the midpoint, but I sort of like this notion of unless it's an incumbent who's higher than the minimum, I think the budget should be the minimum. And then to get up to those graduated points, I think there needs to be some checks in that. Or otherwise, I think we sort of have a runaway pay scale where you have a lot of inequities, where you're going to have incumbents who are falling way behind their peers that are newer. And that worries me because, if somebody who comes in now new comes in at the minimum, but then next year the elected official can budget to the midpoint, that incumbent is suddenly really behind because there's a $15,000 difference there.
That is why performance increases and merit increases and the longevity increases are so important as well to help alleviate that issue, what you're referring to. I will tell you that that rule, that policy, whatever you want to call it, I did look at other pay policies in the area, and that one is a practice of City of Fayetteville. So they give their hiring official a 15% threshold from their minimum to negotiate with, and they budget accordingly. So
are there checks in that for how are there sort of like stair steps for how you
not for the 15%. Now, after 15%, they go through JSAP and they go through personnel.
I'm getting different feedback from the assessor saying that he does think there are steps built into that. I don't know. That's what concerns. I mean, I don't mind there being flexibility. In fact, I think every hiring manager needs flexibility, but there's got to be some checks to it so that it doesn't hurt incumbents, so it doesn't get. And I don't want to say that anybody intentionally says, I want to abuse the pay system, but when you have unchecked discretion, that's what happens just accidentally, right? So I don't.
Right.
So, we ran into this situation where we had a number of employees who were waiting for that person to retire or die so they could move into that spot. So we created Deputy Assessor 1, 2, and 3 levels. And so Deputy Assessor 1 starts out, no requirements, coming right in. They start out at the min unless they have some sort of, it's hard to find people that have experience in what we do. And but we do give a 5% if they're bilingual because it helps. Because a lot of big percentage of our customers are bilingual. Deputy Assessor 2, you have to complete classes and courses in order, and you have to cross-train over into another department in order to reach that Deputy 2 status. So we have a requirement for that. Deputy 3, you have to pass an IAAO 101 course. And if you pass that course after you've taken your other, so you have a course that you take at the Deputy 2 and you cross-train in another position, Deputy 3, you have to pass the IAAO 101 course. And then you move up at your own pace as you're ready, but it gives people an opportunity to come in at the ground level and move up at their own pace. And they're not waiting for someone to move on or quit or something so that they can move into that spot. So it allows them to grow at their own pace. And we've seen there's some people that want to come in, they just want the job. There's other people that want to make it a career. This allows them to make it a career.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dilemma that every employing entity faces, is that happy medium between rewarding performance and making sure that pay is tied to some objective factors. And I think right now the frustration with the system we have is that it's too focused on objective factors like tenure, things like that, cost of living, and not enough on performance. But I think it's because over the years this body's kind of thrown up their hands and been like, we don't really know how to do it that way, right? And so I just want to make sure the pendulum is not swinging the other way too far, that we still have those objective checks. And that's,
we created a matrix for the merit proposal, presented it to the other elected officials, presented it to HR. They really liked it. And when we hire our folks, the first thing that I say that I said I make it real easy. I'm looking for attendance, attitude, and accuracy. Those are the three things that we're looking at. This is what we're judging. And for a while there, we had an attendance issue, so we weighted it at 50% was just showing up to work because we need you here. And then it was having a good attitude. And then the other part was we measured the accuracy of the work, because a lot of what we're doing is data collection. And if we had to go back and we had to correct other people's work, then we're doing double the work.
yeah, I know. Well, and I mean, I know I've talked to JP Ecke about this, but we do pay equity studies. And when you sit down with an employer and say, okay, what do you think drives pay? And they say, oh, well, performance, years of service, education. And so you capture all that data. And then when you show them through the multiple regression analysis, and they're like, oh my gosh, performance doesn't help. And so it ends up being so hard to really objectively quantify what drives pay. It can be a fluke in some instances.
Well, and when you're working in that office with those people, they know who's worthy of it and who's not. And when you do that across the board, equal pay, you're discouraging your rock stars to say, you know what, so-and-such over there does just enough not to get fired. What is motivating me to do just enough not to get fired? You know, and so I do really believe in the merit system, but it's got to be blind. It's got to be at a point when, I mean, there's a metric system. There's a way to calculate it. And we do monthly, our supervisors each month look and they keep track of it. And once a month, they look at each person that they're over and they work on that. Because there's a lot of things that you forget throughout the year if you just do it once or twice a year. Things that happen where either we get a lot of emails from customers saying, wow, this person bent over backwards. I couldn't believe how much they helped me, and they really made my day. I didn't know government worked like this, you know. And we save those, and we apply that to their file.
Let me ask one more question. So the roughly $1.6 million tag is I want to make sure I know what that's based off of. It's the people up here are, if there's an incumbent, you've already slotted them to a certain number, right?
Yes.
So
You're referring to this column?
yeah, the total change.
And
So
this
you've
total
got-
change, the sum, is the 1.6. So this total change is that's the actual dollar figure,
Okay.
okay, of their increase based on where they're at now.
Well, and I guess that's because you've got some positions that are not filled, or I guess I'm trying to figure out.
The vacant positions and stuff like that?
Yeah, the vacant positions, are they all being budgeted then at the midpoint?
Yes.
Okay, and then how did you slot incumbents
How did we slot?
in the range? So an
Well,
incumbent.
like a current employee
Yeah,
is what you're
yeah,
meaning?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
yeah. So a position that's
Okay,
filled.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that I tried to explain that earlier. Let me go back over
Yeah.
to a specific example. I think we were using the assessor's department, their deputy 3 and 2. So let me show you those. Okay.
Well, and I guess that's because what the assessor's talking about, I want to make sure, like, did all of his people get slotted correctly? Okay,
No.
okay.
That was the first thing we noticed was we had an employee that's been here for 2 months as a deputy 1 making more than a deputy 3 who's been here for 6 years has their level 4 assessment. So when we saw this, that created a panic for us because these folks that we have at these deputy 3 levels, they've taken the initiative to go to these classes.
Yeah.
And they're spending a week away from home and they're going through basically a college semester in 4 days and then tested on it, have to score 70% or higher. And this person that's been here for 6 years, in one comparison, is just, he is phenomenal. He's got over 40 years of managerial experience in the grocery store industry. Came over here because he got tired of working 90 hours a week, wanted a set schedule. He's been here 6 years, doesn't miss a day, rolls over vacation pay. And then we've got a person at a Deputy 1 starting, been here 2 months, that's going to make more money than him. And he's been here 6 years. So that's when we saw this, and we weren't given the formula. We were given a screenshot of here's what the changes are. And so we're data crunchers.
Yeah.
We want to know, we want to look at the formula.
Is there a formula?
Yes, there is. I would like to say something in regards to what he's explaining. His positions were directly correlated to Benton County if there was a counterpart, okay? What we did not do with his positions is do the straight structure comparison, which I think is what Russell is referring to. So if there are 13, the deputy assessor 3, if you look over here at this spreadsheet, this is our current values, the yellow. So a 13, if you correlate that over, would have been a 10 at Benton County. These green are Benton County's 2022. So that would mean their new pay is an 8 in a grade 8, okay? We did not do that with those. We did a direct correlation for the position because there is a Deputy 3 assessor in existence at Benton County. So it was very easy to compare, and I hate to use the word easy, but it was easy to compare that position title to the counterpart. At Benton County, that position.
Well, but I guess we don't know if they have the structure that.
They have structures 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So they have 4, and you can see that right here. This is Benton County's positions for their assessors. They have actually a level 4 even. So theirs is an 8 for the 3. So if you're doing a direct comparison, it's that. Okay. So if you went back over here, so this is the highlighted one of if we just did the structure comparison, but this is Benton County, so theirs is an 8 right here. So we correlated it based on this value, not based on this one right here.
Well, then, how did you choose where to slot? Because would you go back to the Washington County assessors? Because it's like you've got.
This one?
Yeah, go back over if you don't mind to the.
This way?
Yes. So like you've got multiple, like assessor 2s, right? You've got 5. How did you? And they're all, but one of them's paid more right now, or 2, right? 1584 versus 15.
Well, these are their current pay amounts, yes.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out. So like, how did you?
We pulled these directly from our software system, and these are what our employees were currently making.
Okay, so how did you then translate that to where they go?
Okay, so good question. So this is their current range right here. We took the difference so they wouldn't lose their merit, their COLA, all of that. Okay. We did take their current pay grade. We took the difference from their minimum and, subtracted the annual amount to get their difference over here, which is this Z column. This is their distance from the minimum. So that accounted for that. And we just added that in once we got that position moved over to their new structure at the 4%.
Okay, and
can I clarify something that may help this?
You're gonna have to wait for the chair.
okay, so was it just a strict percentage? So the person that made 1584 versus the others that made 15, did you just figure out the math and that's the difference between the?
Yes, so let me just highlight the column. So this is that 1584.
Right.
So when we scroll all the way over, you can see they have a minimum distance of $1,700. And so that is why that person is making more than some of the others that are in that similar position.
Why does it show the total change is the same?
For this one, it doesn't.
AB.
It's 14.04.
The dollar amount's the same.
So we took AA and we subtracted P, which is this.
Did they all just get the same dollar raise?
No. 241, 242.
Okay, well, I've taken up enough time. Thank you, Mr.
It's okay. So with all of this being said, we did say earlier that we are willing to meet with electeds and, or elected, excuse me, between now and next Thursday. So if there needs to be some more adjustments, I mean, we can entertain those and do that at that time and prepare those for the quorum court meeting. I'm not really seeing where there's a huge discrepancy in this department. I mean, I would like it to be pointed out to me. I mean, other than the fact that we did not do a structure comparison, we correlated directly Benton County with the new proposed numbers. I'm not sure why that is an issue, but that's not for me to decide.
Mr. Seibert, did you have a comment?
Yes, so position number, I'll give you the position numbers and this is in reference to what Russell was talking about.
Okay.
So the position number is 105054.
Let me filter.
If you can just filter the deputy 1, 2s, and 3s if you want to.
You said 5-4?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
on their new proposed salary, can you filter it just on the deputy 1, 2s, and 3s?
Yeah. Oops. Okay.
So on 5-4, that is the position that the person has been here for less than 2 months, and they're a deputy 1. And based on your new proposed grade, they are going to be proposed grade is going to be a 4. If you scroll over to the proposed salary amounts and keep that row highlighted, that person will be making $38,040. And if you look up through there, that is more than most of the other positions for people that are in deputy 2s and 3s and have been here multiple years.
So those individuals, let me filter this. So here are their current pay, okay? This person has that minimum distance value calculated into theirs. And so that is why that individual is projected to be making more as of January 1 because of that minimum distance value being calculated in there.
But that's the part we're not understanding, because this is a person that has less than 2 months of experience.
We're still training this person.
Okay.
They are in a grade.
And the person that's training them is going to make less than the person they're training.
So I'm going to assume that it's this person who's making 34. Is that what you're saying? That this person is the person training this person?
Yes.
Okay. These are the numbers that this person was hired at. So
It's not equitable.
Once again, that's why our current structure has flaws, because it allows for things like that to happen.
This new structure is not equitable.
The structure is...
How can we justify a person that is being trained, paying them more than a person who's been there for years is making less and is fully trained and is actually training other people.
The reason that that is occurring is because of the minimum distance value from their current pay. The structure, the new
Is it
structure is
fair?
equitable.
Wait a minute. We're not gonna talk over one another.
All right.
And I'm gonna reel us all back in here. Let's keep our goal in mind tonight. We're here for the employees, okay? Ms. Patty?
The new structure is equitable. These final proposed values for these employees are based on their current pay and the formula that was used to determine their final proposal. And so you are going to see, based on whoever hired the person and negotiated their pay, you will see still some fluctuation with that based on whether or not the elected went through JSAP and personnel when they were recruiting and asked for a higher starting pay for that individual. So this discrepancy right here that you all are pointing out, I would say that that may be the case with this one, unless we went back into our finance software and looked at all the different quick pay changes for this individual. I could not tell you the complete story tonight, but based on the numbers, that is what it looks like is occurring with this employee. Because this is what we will see in other instances where an employee does have this minimum distance value being calculated into this shift over to this new structure.
Let me ask this, because I can absolutely see the argument there. You know what I mean? The issue that's presented in this special case, right? How would we can adjust these and fine tune them, right?
How would we fix it? Yes, exactly.
I mean-
And that is why the controls are being put into place so that going into 2024, the elected would be able to have the flexibility to fix those issues. Or if they would like to do that next year, if it's, if quorum court allows that to be heard, then I would think that that could be done next year.
Or we can address concerns after this meeting.
Or, yes.
One-on-one.
And bring them back to you next week. So we can do that as well. So there are options is the point.
I mean,
guess.
and I appreciate what you guys have done. You're painting in broad strokes, right? I mean, you're putting in equations. You probably have not went through and compared every scenario, right? Because what I'm saying
mean
is
by every
the work that
scenario?
you have done. Here's the criticism I have of the process, and I think it's just a time crunch. To me, the work you have done is very beneficial. I think our elected officials have agreed we need to move in some way in this direction, right? But I can also understand that there's probably scenarios like this that need to be addressed on the front end, right? And I would
Yes.
think working with the elected official or the director would try to highlight some of those so they can be corrected on the front end, right?
Yes, that is correct. And
So-
that is why I did say earlier that there are some who did not get back with us.
Yeah.
And we are still willing to meet
Well,
with them and do this.
I hear the criticisms, and I can understand that, this is a very accelerated process. And I think there's some criticism to be had there. Here's what I will say about this, and this is for the quorum court and everyone, where I see where we're at with this, is we've had some people who are uncomfortable with it, and they're saying, let's shelve this and work on this again next year. Okay? And the alternative in their mind is let's just do a big COLA adjustment to get us through this year. Okay? The comment I have about that is I would hate to see us lose all that progress if there are things that can be done in the meantime to correct these issues that we see. And I think we're at the point where we could do something really, really beneficial to all the employees in the county if we could get these things corrected. And you're saying there's a process that you think could do that.
Yes, I do. Between now and next Thursday, I definitely think that we can correct that. I do have some amendments that we actually have gone through with a few that I would like to show you all. We had the sheriff's department. They looked at their employees and
let's just wait on that 1 minute. Assessor Hill, I want to give you the opportunity to continue here about, what we want to
Yeah.
address before we get into amendments.
So I'm here on behalf, I drew the short straw tonight, and so as a designated spokesman for our group, this comes from the circuit clerk, the county clerk, the collector, the treasurer, and myself. When we received this, we were given it on a Friday at 11. I looked at it, I immediately saw the discrepancies, and then my first thing is, how could this be? So we looked into it a lot deeper. We crunched the data. This is basically, and we look at equity and balance of things. It was kind of hard because we didn't have the formulas. We were just given a screenshot of what the new adjustments were. And I'm looking at some of my top best people, 4%, 4%, 4%, 4%, and then we ended up with an average of 12% increase out of our department. And then I'm looking at going, this person just started, this person's training them, but we're paying this. So it didn't add up. Kyle, Becky, Angela, and Bobby all had a bunch of concerns that we were kind of left in the dark in this. It'd been great if we'd been part of the process. And we could have went to Benton County, and I could have sat down with the assessor there and said, hey, this is our guy here. This is okay. And we could have done a lot of that work and been a lot more accurate and so we had a lot of discrepancy. So it caused us to look deeper. And then we start looking at their formula, and we start looking at a couple of departments, and again, we weren't given any information other than this formula that they gave us. And so this caused us pause to stop, and I'm looking and I'm seeing where, okay, the Washington County grade's a 26, and then the Benton County grade's a 23. So the new proposed grade for a 26 is a 21. And then I go and I look at the HR position, and it's a 26. It actually went up 5 spots from the proposed range that they came from. And then when I look at that, and I look at the entire HR department, they're all over the proposed new grade. And same thing with the IT department. And then I'm looking at that going, wait a minute. And then I start thinking about the whole process. I'm going, there's a little bit of conflict of interest here in this whole thing, that we've got 2 departments. How many, and I don't know how many of these they've ever done before. This may be the first one. I don't know. I don't know of any work that they've done like this, so, or any past history of that. But from what I saw out of ours, there was not equity. And then when I look and I'm going, wow, a 37% increase over here for this person, and they're in charge of the project, it just didn't pass the smell test for me. And without having the formulas, it looked, so I think there was a reason we had a third party in here handling this. Is so when things came up, and it could be legit, I don't know. But looking at it, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to us. And so it was alarming to all of us. And this puts us in a familiar territory, because we have always, Kyle, Becky, Bobby, Angela, myself, we have always advocated for competitive pay for our employees. And we know that the quorum court is in agreement, and that they want to do something, and they want to get us up there to competitive pay. We know that's your heart, and that's great, because that hasn't been the case in some years past. But I don't know that this is the right plan. I believe it's the wrong plan. This is a massive undertaking with major implications, and it does not need to be rushed. It needs to be right. And I'm speaking on behalf of 4 other offices.
Thank you, Assessor Hill and Director of the Electeds. J.P. Simons?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing this. This is obviously the culmination of a lot of work, and we see that the point here is to do the most good for the most number of people. You touched on something earlier that gives me a lot of concern. This is a structured comparison based off the assumption of titles across Washington County versus Benton County, and the assumption is that those titles represent equal job duties. If that's not the case, those assumptions will create disparities in pay up or down that could be significant. I understand the time crunch and why that took place. If we had a true market study, it'd be a different scenario. I also understand that the Quorum Court as a whole, this body sat here last year and said that our goal was to revamp the entire salary administration plan. And we kind of need to act on that. But I also see the point of we don't need to settle for good if we can hit great. I don't want to kick the can down the road. Our employees need to be compensated fairly and justly. I don't know if this plan is quite there. We need to do something, and we need to do something quick. I'm thinking it's going to fall on our electeds to figure out what those job duty comparisons are without relying on a market study and the time that will take. Assessor Hill, you and your colleagues are going to have to get that data to incorporate into this existing framework and make it equitable. Or it will be kicked down. The can will be kicked down the road. Nobody wants to wait for a new court with a new county judge and new JPs to try to address this complexity of an issue. We need to do it soon. We only have a few more meetings this year.
JP Hires?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a very simple request. Though I'm not a voting member of this body, I'm a voting member of the full Quorum Court, and this is my first time to see this data. Is this something that could be sent to all of the JPs? Because without having time to really dig into this, it's going to be really hard for me to say yes or no to anything that I haven't been able to look at on my own. So if this report could be sent out to all of us, that would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
Any more questions before we move to the next phase? Okay. So here's the process as I see it, as we're going to move along logistically in the committee. We have this salary administration program that we would have to make motions and amend the budget to match it, right, or to include it. Ms. Burchett has some amendments or some revisions that she's going to suggest that we take up or consider. I think we need to vote those amendments into this plan, and then and we get that done, the plan needs to go into the budget, if that makes sense, if that's the pleasure of this body. Okay, so I'm about to let her move to this next phase, if you will, to go over some of these. JP Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've gone full circle in the last hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever we've been. And I am of a mind, if we can find a way to resolve the issues like Assessor Hill has, and we can do them promptly, we ought to get that done and get it done in this budget. Because if we don't, there's going to be a quorum court sitting in this room next October or November or December having the same discussions again. And I think we've proved that the current system doesn't work. And I was listening to a leadership podcast last week that said they'd surveyed employees across the country, and the average of the 3 surveys said 40% of the employees in this country are looking for another job. Now, I don't know whether that's true, but if it's close to true, that's scary. And we've proven that we can't fill a lot of the positions here. And we've proven that when we make adjustments, like in the sheriff's department, the road department, we can fill the positions. I think we need to see if we can find a way to get this done, if it can happen.
JP Pond?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've been sitting and listening to everyone concerned with this, and I recognize that that HR has worked hard on this, spent a lot of hours. And I completely hear Mr. Hill, and I understand that he is a spokesperson for the rest of the elected officials. I would really like to see them get together with HR one at a time and get the glitches ironed out of this. And it's not going to be perfect. What humans do never is. But I'd really like to see y'all get this ironed out some way where you could live with it and have some kind of improvement in morale countywide and go from there. I really have a problem with kicking this down the road to the next quorum court, who we don't know who that's going to be. Something does need to be done for the employees now, and I'm putting you to task. I understand that, and I completely understand the position you're in. I'm just asking you to work hard on this and come up with something that can work for the time being and get as far into these changes as we can. Thank you.
JP Ecke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a reminder, when we did the 2016 market study and the Johansson Group regraded all of the positions and job evaluations, that cost the county 1% of the total revenue for that year. If our revenue was $70 million, 1% of that went to that market study. I don't think we're prepared to pay 1% to any outside group for a market evaluation study at this point. I think you're to be commended, Ms. Burchett and Director Reynolds, on doing this in-house and saving the county a lot of money. We have talent and we have ability. Now, if there were errors made, I know that we've heard these concerns, which are our concerns. I agree with Justice Johnson and Pond. If there is an easy fix, you tell me the 4 people that need to be changed, then let's work with it. And each individual, we can do that. That is a solution, and that's a win-win. Mm-hmm. And finally, Mr. Chair, I have heard from the employees of Washington County, and they are so excited about this plan. They feel like there is a new day coming, and they are on pins and needles right now saying, what are y'all going to do? You mean you're going to kill it? Wait a minute. Do you hear us? Do you hear our voice? And I'm saying, employees from Washington County, yes, we do. We hear your voice. And I support that we pass this because at the heart of it, y'all are there. At the heart of it, you. And I care about you. So if we have to sit in the sandbox together and find a solution, I think, Mr. Chair, that's what we all want to do. And I thank you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Ecke. I think with that, will you go ahead and present your revisions that you've already collected to this point?
Sure. Okay. So far, the positions that have experienced a shift from what was in the packet is everything over here that you will see in red. Okay, and I'll scroll over in one moment. I can go through each of them if you would like and tell you exactly what occurred with them. The majority of the Sheriff's Department and jail employees were in regards to the sheriff comping his positions to City of Fayetteville, because it has been the previous practice. That's how they prepared their flex plan that we have in place right now. So it did make sense for the sheriff to go in and make those, fine-tune those positions to make them comparable with what City of Fayetteville had for those positions. And so everything in red, and mostly what that was is they shifted up either 1 grade or 2 grades in the structure. And so as a result, it did shift those employees' pay, the end result, for them, based on that. Let's see. The other employees that experience this are our chiefs in all of our departments. Does anybody have a question about the sheriff's department? No? Okay. I'm going to bring up all the chiefs side by side so I can more easily show you what I'm talking about. Oh, that didn't work. There we go. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just looking at, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, so with the chief's positions, we did see, whenever we were looking at Benton County's figures for the chief deputies, in Benton County, they do have 1 grade for all of their chief deputies, with the exception of their chief financial office. Well, I don't think that's what they call it. It's the deputy chief in the treasurer's office. Okay, they are rated higher than all the other chiefs. So here is their chief deputy pay grade. So we correlated all of our chief deputies to this pay range at the 4% for Benton County. In the numbers that you were provided originally, our treasurer chief deputy was correlated to, where is it? Maybe it was at the top. Oh, excuse me, it's right here. Was correlated to Benton County's as well, which was a 22. So it did have that position for us in the figures that were presented to you originally, rated at a 22. After speaking with Treasurer Hill earlier over the phone and explaining to him this discrepancy, he instructed us and was in favor of moving his chief deputy to correlate with all others. So that is the change that you see here in red, all of them being at the new grade 17, which is similar to the structure of Benton County with the exception of that chief treasurer. Any questions about that? So far, those are, I believe, the only amendments that we have so far.
And that was based on meeting with an elected official and going through the positions and adjusting accordingly based on their expertise.
Thank you. Is that it? Does that end yours?
That is it.
Your evening?
Yes, I hope.
I hope. Yeah.
Unless you have more questions.
Well, any more questions for this team? You got one more, looks like. JP Rio Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was just looking at some of the sheets that are being passed around. Am I correct in seeing that under this plan that the deputy county attorney would be making more than the county attorney?
They're budgeted higher. They're budgeted at their midpoint.
Okay.
Because we budgeted all vacant positions at the midpoint in order to be able to negotiate and recruit.
I agree that our employees definitely need a raise. And it's high time for our folks to get a cost of living raise, to get us up to par with Benton County. But I also agree that it looks like, just from looking at a lot of these numbers, it needs to be fine-tuned. I agree with that. I do agree that we need to get something done this year, but we still have almost 3 months left in the year. I don't see why we are trying to rush this through to next week's meeting. The only time crunch that I can see with that is trying to get this done before the election, which sounds like more of a political consideration to me than anything else. And so I think it behooves us to take a little bit of time. We have 3 months almost, and work with our other elected officials and get this plan fine-tuned. There's no reason that we have to rush this through in a matter of a week. But I would like to see our hardworking county employees get the pay raises they deserve for 2023. Thank you.
So I think of what I'm collectively hearing tonight is I think it's been good we walked through this, and I think it's been good that we've heard the proposed revisions. Unless I have a motion to do something, I don't see the appetite to take this up this evening. Okay. So to me, that moves us back to the budget itself, which is the item agenda. I think we're done with you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thanks for being patient. Thanks for taking the time. We appreciate you. First, I would ask if there's any more amendments we want to make to the budget, and then I would like to, us as a body, consider moving that up to the full quorum court this evening. I think we've done our whittling on it, and I think that the conversation could be much more beneficial now at the full quorum court level, but I leave that to the pleasure of my colleagues here on this committee. So are there any additional amendments that we want to make to the budget at this time? J.P. Wilson?
I've just got a question. We haven't done anything on the capital items in the sheriff's and jail's area, and I don't know if he's come up with any prioritization. There hasn't been no amendment offered to adopt all of it. So I'm just curious if he's come up with any prioritization and saying this is a must and these could wait, anything of that nature, if they wanted to address that.
I'll open that up to the sheriff or any of his representatives tonight if anybody wants to comment on that. Good evening, Sheriff Hilder. Will you push the little man on the microphone there? J.P. Wilson asked, we have not taken any action on the enforcement or detention body-worn cameras or the vehicle recording systems, and he was asking if there is any prioritization there or any way we could break those up over a couple years, or any comments you might have on that.
Our internal conversation has been that we feel like the body-worn cameras would fit in with the ARP funding, if that's something you would want to consider. That it fits into their criteria because of the population we serve within the detention center. That would free up over $500,000, close to $600,000. I was not at the meeting, but I was informed. J.P. Duncan, I think, were you going to give us kind of a hard number to work toward? Did I misunderstand that?
Sheriff, more of a request of prioritization than a number. So if there's things that you say, absolutely we need to do now, so that helps the body worn cameras that we can use ARPA funding. And
Okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood the relaying of that information as far as the prioritization. I thought it was more we were looking at a hard number that you all were looking for us to try and achieve. Those asks are not wants, they're needs that we've got to do. So I would, that first recommendation would be, if you agree that it fits into that criteria, that would be an opportunity to free up $600,000 out of that funding. But I will go back and we'll certainly develop a prioritization list for you.
JP Duncan?
So I'm looking at the jail operations request. The body worn cameras is 100,000, and then we've got 62K. I know, is that over the multiple years? It comes up to $500,000.
Yeah, the overall project.
Okay.
Oh, and tied in is the revamping of our existing camera system within the detention center, which is how many cameras is that now?
Something over 200.
It's 200 plus cameras, but the life of the camera and the system is outlived its expected.
So you're talking about the $600,000 surveillance system, or is that separate?
Yes, that's what we're speaking about, that we believe that is covered under ARPA.
I misunderstood when I was coming in trying to get filled in on which. So the ARP funding within would be the camera system within the
So
jail.
that's the surveillance system at the jail. That's
Correct.
separate from the body worn cameras,
It
which
is.
there's both jail request and patrol request.
Correct.
On. Okay. So that, if we could have an ordinance drawn up for that $600,000 request for ARPA, I don't know if Chief Staff Lester, if you can work with the sheriff on that. Turn it back over.
JP Wilson, did you get we kind of stole the floor from you there. You good? Okay.
And we'll certainly prepare a prioritization list of those requests. My apologies for that. You can just beat me for a couple more months anyway.
Anything else for consideration there?
Was there anything else?
Do I have any other motions? Would we like to move this to the full quorum court? I would like to entertain a motion to move this budget to the full quorum court for further consideration. I know we have some more open items, but I think we've been through it enough now, and we can bring it to that level, and all the justices can have an opportunity to start to grapple with it. Justice Johnson?
Move that we move it to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Any seconds? Okay. I have a motion to pass by J.P. Johnson, a second by J.P. Wilson. Any further discussion on that? Any public comments? You have to push the little person on the button. Do you see the little person there? Thank you.
I'm getting your feedback. That's interesting. Okay. Sarah Moore, Fayetteville, Arkansas. In regard to the possibility of pulling out the money for the cameras for the jail facility, I just really want to make sure. We've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of years about the American Rescue Plan Act monies and about the intent and purposes of those monies. We currently have an open process for nonprofits that are looking to get some of that money potentially into the community. Have done a lot of pandemic relief work, which is, for historically oppressed populations who, have lived, in poverty and were further, harmed over the years of the pandemic. And so we're in the middle of figuring out exactly, which one of those organizations will be funded. But additionally, just looking at the actual restrictions, I'm real curious, which bucket of the ARPA money you're considering, because it's supposed to be in response to COVID. And so I know we took a $10 million standard deduction, so I'm curious if that's where that's coming from. We gave over $5 million to, for the firefighters' breathing apparatus. Did that go towards the standard deduction? Taxpayers will still be here long term. And so I have a lot of concerns about some of the things that we've applied towards ARPA. And whenever we're audited by the federal government, the concern about how we might have to pay back $600,000 because we're not, granted that we're going to have a strong economy going forward. So again, I would just ask for your thoughtful consideration going forward about what we're using against ARPA when we're planning for our taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments.
Blake Chancellor, I'm with the Public Defender's Office. I just wanted to, I know the budget is being passed up, and as I understand it, there'll be further discussion about some of those things that haven't been specifically addressed. But one of the things that remained in our budget was we had asked for an increase of $39,000 on our part-time salaries. I bring that up today only because I also see that there is a special ordinance that's being asked for by the prosecutor to increase their part-time salaries. To be clear, our request for the $39,000 would put us even with what the prosecutor was before this new ordinance that they're now requesting tonight. So we are already $39,000 less than what they're evaluating. Their staff, when I talked to Mr. Durrett, basically what they're saying is we're not going to have enough money for basically what it is law clerks. And to try and give this as quick of a real world example as I can give you, this was my docket today. This is 41 people that I had in one day. And each one of those 40 people, they have to have discovery, they have to be arraigned, there's paperwork that they go over for arraignment, and that's what our law clerks do. You're paying, it is a student with a bachelor's degree that is in law school, that is there because they want to be there, and you are paying them not much more than what they probably would make at McDonald's. And the point I'm making is this: if they don't do it, then I have to do it. And if I have to do it for 41 people, then I don't get 41 people resolved in that day. So just like Mr. Durrett is asking for that increase in his part-time salary, what we're asking for is simply to be put on par with what he had before this new request. And we are desperately short. We've had to cut back hours. We've had to hold law clerks. We have not, that affects arraignments and everything else, and that just slows down the process of what we're trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to put that back in the mind from last meeting. I think there was some that may not have seen that on the budget or may have had an old budget. So I just wanted to reiterate that, especially with the ordinance being considered tonight from the prosecutor.
Thank you. Public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Eva Madison, but I wanted to just comment because I thought this was more important to say tonight before the vote next Thursday. This is what concerns me. I always look at the new revenue for a line item to try to figure out how we're going to sustain spending. And right now, comparing new revenue to the budgets in the county general line item, we are $3.9 million over. In the road fund, we are $800,000 over. And in the jail fund, we are $3.3 million over. That is almost $8 million that you all are proposing to budget over new revenue. While we have the money in the bank to pay for that gap next year, it's not sustainable. And so you're basically passing a budget on to the full quorum court that is going to require either serious budget cuts in the coming years or a tax increase. because you cannot sustain a budget that is $8 million out of whack. Thanks.
Public comments.
Good afternoon. Beth Koger, Fayetteville, Arkansas. I just want to remind the court that when the public defenders were speaking just now, that in 2019, when we had the criminal justice assessment study by the National Center for State Courts, one of their recommendations, and it was a recommendation that was strongly stressed, was that the prosecutor and the public defender be on the same level playing fields, that they be treated equally, even with regard to parking spaces. So when it comes to considering the ordinance that the public defender was speaking about, I want you to remember that. Thank you.
Public comments. All right, we'll take up the question. We have a motion by J.P. Johnson to pass the ordinance establishing the budget to the full quorum court. Second by J.P. Wilson. All those favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes to the full quorum court. First item of new business, we had an item added. We're going to hear from Mr. Robbins with returning home. Mr. Robbins, thank you for being patient.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I'm going to give everyone a recap of what kind of the last 2 years of the program we provided for Washington County. The Community Alternative Program works with the judicial system in Washington County. We take individual referrals from attorneys, from probation officers, parole officers. That individual is either in jail or getting ready to go to jail as a diversionary option that the prosecutors would agree upon. They would send them to us for 4 months instead of keeping them in jail and further incarceration. And during that time, they're with us for 4 months. We initially address their identification needs. We address their health needs, their mental health needs. We make sure we get them a job. We get them into classes, so they go to class 5 days a week. We have them meeting with the caseworker every single week. They go through financial classes. They go through a fatherhood program if they have a child. They go through a trauma healing class. They also are meeting with a therapist every single week on site. And then they have oversight by whoever, if they're on probation or parole, we work with that officer to find out if they want to do any passes to let the individual go and see their families during the weekends or something like that. So we've been able to do all that at around $60 a day compared to what costs in jail is $73 a day. And so we've been very successful as well. We are running at a 25% recidivism rate, which compared to the national rate for county jails is 90%. So we've been really encouraged with that. Individuals have actually stayed on in our building after they've graduated, so not really seeing it as much as a punishment, but as an opportunity to change their life. And so many of them are now in leadership roles and mentoring guys that are coming through the program, and so that's been pretty exciting. We've been very blessed to work with the Sheriff's Department. They've been so good with us in Washington County. We actually do a class in the county jail, so every other week my staff goes in and works with the individuals that have been referred to us to get to know them in person and take them through some materials so they'll kind of know what the classes look like. And the jail staff, the sheriff's staff have been absolutely amazing. Public Defender's Office, Prosecutor's Office has been so good to us. We work hand in hand with drug court. We've actually been taking individuals that would be referred to drug court, and prior to them being accepted in drug court, they're actually, if an individual is homeless, they would ask them to come to us first so that they can get stabilized, get employment, find a place to live, and then start their 2 years of drug court, which would be more sustainable for that program. So we partnered in that way. So everything went really well. My kind of our dilemma right now is Washington County has 16 beds. Of those 16 beds, 15 of them are full as of today. We have 11 individuals that are currently accepted and waiting a bed, and we got 9 referrals that are pending in process. So we get twice as many referrals as we have space. And so now we kind of got some folks sitting in county jail just waiting on us, just because we don't have the capacity. So there's a couple requests we'd have. The first request would be to ask you to consider going from 16 beds to 24 beds. We have 8 Benton County beds, and 32 total beds is the capacity of our program. So we'd ask you to extend that so that we can meet the demand better and get folks out of jail quicker. We'd also ask you to consider funding this program at the end of this year for 3 years. And the idea of the 3 years is it gives us, instead of a year to year hoping this thing gets refunded, it gives us the ability to really invest in this program and what we're doing and knowing that it'll be here long term. And then it would also give you the ability to lock in the rate of $60 a day instead of each year coming in and asking for an increase, because that's kind of what the economy is looking like these days. So I'd ask you to please consider that and let me know if you have any questions.
Questions for Director Robbins? Comments? J.P. Wilson.
Just one, how far out are we committed on the 16 beds that we have?
Yes, the funding will end in April, and so end of April. And so what we would really need is a decision by December to be able, because we have to have 4 months of funding because it's a 4-month program, because we can't say we're going to accept somebody if we don't have the funding to take them all the way through the program.
J.P. Essery.
Thank you very much. So my understanding is that we really do need to get this passed in a fairly timely manner in order to be sure that we're covered.
Absolutely.
And I guess the other thing is that this has been on our plate for a while, and for some reason, it's just now getting here.
You guys have been very busy with your budget. This was intense. Like, there's a lot going on, so I totally understand that it just got here today. But we really do appreciate your guys' partnership, and so everyone's very clear that if you guys don't fund this program, we'll just have to close it. So like, there's no way I could supplement it just because we don't have the resources to do that.
Any further? J.P. Duncan.
So my request would be, Mr. Robbins, to work with our county attorney to have an ordinance drawn up. And I think knowing that next month we won't have committee meetings with voting, if you can have that drawn up and added to the agenda for quorum court meeting, we can consider it quorum court. Because obviously there's nothing for us to vote on this evening, but we hear the ask, we can have that drawn up into an ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right. Item number 9 is an ordinance anticipating revenue totaling $1,082,000 in the Crisis Stabilization Unit Grant Fund and appropriating $1,082,000 from the Crisis Stabilization Unit Grant Fund to the other professional services line item in the CSU Grant Fund budget for 2022. This is us getting our grant money for the CSU and appropriating it. J.P. Duncan.
Move we pass item 9 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
I have a motion to pass the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. Any discussion or questions? Public comments?
Sarah Moore, Fayetteville. I don't know, because I just found this information out earlier this week, but I don't know if you're aware that the Crisis Stabilization Unit is actually not able to take in clients 24/7. And so I'm just curious about what our financial obligation is with UAMS as a provider if the taxpayers are not getting a 24-hour availability to use the crisis stabilization unit. When I called them on Monday to the line, it was confirmed to me that they weren't going to be taking clients until Wednesday. And so I wasn't able to confirm how many beds have been available or how many clients have been served. But whenever the CSU was opened back up after being closed for over a year, this very valuable taxpayer resource, we were told, the doors were swinging wide open. And so what that would conjure up in my mind is that at any time somebody could call and there is going to be a bed that could be available if they meet the criteria. And I don't know that that's necessarily what's happening with the current operation. And so, this is over $1 million, and I'm concerned about, do we just continue to write a check regardless of the kind of service that we're being provided? And what is the oversight and the scorecarding? In the past, there were monthly meetings that let us know about the service with the CSU. It opened back this summer. I don't know if there have been any public meetings. I think they had moved to maybe quarterly before it closed. But I haven't seen anything watching the county calendar to see that that's occurred. So I would really hope that we do some due diligence to understand what the taxpayers are getting with this money, because honestly, I'm not sure, as someone who has loved ones and other people in the community that oftentimes need this very valuable resource. Thank you.
Public comments. All right. I have a motion to pass to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 9 will move to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation. Item number 10, an ordinance anticipating additional revenue in the amount of $14,804 in the Law Enforcement Grant Fund and appropriating $14,804 from the Law Enforcement Grant Fund to the JAG Grant Fund budget for 2022. Motions or comments? J.P. Duncan.
I move we pass item number 10 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
I have a motion to pass item 10 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan. Second by J.P. Usry. Any comments or questions? Public comments. I have a motion to pass item number 10 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Usry. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 10 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 11, an ordinance recognizing an additional revenue in the amount of $96,191 in the Law Enforcement Grant Fund and appropriating said $96,191 from the Law Enforcement Grant Fund to the SCAP FY 2020 budget for 2022. Do I have any motions or comments? J.P. Duncan?
I move we pass item number 11 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Motion to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Wilson. Further discussion? Public comments?
Beth Coger, 3661 Embry Drive, Fayetteville, Arkansas. For those people who don't know, SCAAP stands for State Criminal Alien Assistance Program. It's a federal grant program that sends federal money for partial reimbursements to states and counties who incarcerate certain individuals who are undocumented immigrants or who are believed to be undocumented immigrants and who have been convicted of at least one felony or 2 misdemeanors. There's a lot that we have to do in order to get this money. More about that later, but why do we participate in a program that harms, silences, and reduces our immigrant neighbors? We only get reimbursed for what the grant calls undocumented criminal aliens, about whom we provide specific notice within a specific time frame to the Department of Homeland Security. Information like their name, their release date, his or her home and work addresses. We should not be selling information to ICE that allows them to target our immigrant community. Law enforcement should keep us safe and not funnel our friends and neighbors into the ICE deportation machine for money. And that's exactly what this grant does. I don't think it's right or good that we are willing to provide ICE with information about jailed immigrants just so we get more federal funding. When this grant came up last time in 2020,
I'm sure you all remember me speaking against it then. Sheriff Helter told me, Beth, we should welcome any source of revenue that we can get. But should we do that? Even especially if welcoming a source of revenue means that we're selling out our friends and our neighbors. Our participation in this program invites the threat of ICE and the prospect of deportation into immigrants' lives. SCAP does nothing to keep us safe and only serves to fuel mass deportation. For the period of April 2019 through March 2020, 216 ICE detainers were issued. 216. During that period, ICE transported 164 of our immigrant neighbors from the Washington County Detention Center, and during that time, there were other detainer subjects still waiting court dates. So I think it's safe to say that the number increased as those court dates came and went. We should all want our community to be a welcoming and warm place for immigrants to call home. Accepting financial incentives to work with ICE undermines that goal. SCAP reimburses only a small portion of the cost, actually. The grant that we're considering tonight is for the period of July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. For this time period, there were 12,417 inmate bed days reviewed by the Department of Homeland Security. Out of those, 5,348 were known or approved for payment. 7,069 were unknown and not approved for payment.
Thank you, Ms. Coker. Your time's expired.
I need to get
Thank
this
you. Your
across.
time's expired. Public comments. Anybody else? JP Ecke, come on.
Thank you, Lisa Ecke, Springdale, Arkansas. The previous speaker obviously does not work with the immigrant community like I do, the Latinos and the Marshallese. I work with them every single day. And when I tell them what they did in 2020 and how they don't want ICE to come into their neighborhoods, they're going, we want them to because these are gang members. These are deviants. And they come in and they recruit our sons. And sometimes our girls get impregnated and we're sick and tired of this and they need to be deported. We don't want them in our communities. They don't hold our hands and sing kumbaya and let's make a better society. These are deviants. Some of them have been raped their daughters. Some of them have even been deported and come back and commit murder. We're talking about those kind of people. And the immigrant community does not want them. They want the sheriff's department to keep them safe. They came to the United States of America so they could have liberty. And if we don't have safety, we don't have liberty. And that's what our community wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments. Okay, we'll take up the question. I have a motion to pass item number 11 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Wilson. All those in favor? Those opposed? Item number 11 will move to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation. Item number 12, an ordinance appropriating $9,000 from the unappropriated reserves of the general fund to the prosecuting attorney budget for 2022. Before we I have a motion, we need to amend this ordinance. If you look at Article 1, line 24, we need to strike 2023 and replace it for 2022. So I make a motion to amend. Seconded by J.P. Ussery. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Item number 12 has been amended. Prosecuting attorney?
I just invited myself up here because I assumed people would have questions since I'm asking for more money. We're almost out of money, and it's mainly due, obviously, to rising costs. Our big drivers of cost are paper, toner. Paper's up about 25% so far this year. Toner's up about 30%. And that's causing quite a burden on us, as evidenced by the fact that we requested more in next year's budget. We're running short. And the part-time is for our law clerks because we've been working them so much. Now we're having to limit them to between 8 to 12 hours a week, and that's causing additional problems for us in the sense that we are having a backlog. One of the main things they do, in addition to doing discovery, is they do warrant requests that come in. So someone comes in, the officer needs a warrant, an arrest warrant, gives it to a law clerk, they work it up, they type it up, they get everything done, they bring it to us to review and everything else. Those are being backed up because we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money to pay them. So that's what the request is for.
Questions or motions? I have a motion to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Ussery. Second by J.P. Wilson. Any further discussion? Public comments? Take up the question. I have a motion to pass item number 12 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation as amended by J.P. Ussery. Second by J.P. Wilson. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 12 will move to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation. Item number 13, an ordinance recognizing additional revenue of $31,167 in the JDC Grant Fund and appropriating $31,167 from the JDC Grant Fund to the Juvenile Detention Center Grant and Aid 2022-2023 budget for 2022. J.P. Duncan.
Move we pass item number 13 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Motion to pass item number 13 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan. Second by J.P. Simons. Any further discussion or questions? Public comments? I have a motion to pass item number 13 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item 13 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 14, an ordinance appropriating the total amount of $18,115.62 from the unappropriated reserves in the general fund to the various line items in the Election Commission budget for 2022. Software, fuel, and insurance coverage. J.P. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we send this to the quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
I have a motion to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Johnson, second by J.P. Duncan. Any further discussion? Questions, or not questions, public comments? I have a motion to pass item number 14 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Johnson, second by J.P. Duncan. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 14 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 15, an ordinance recognizing additional revenue in the amount of $13,410 in the AOC Juvenile Court Grant Fund and appropriating $13,410 from the AOC Juvenile Grant Fund 3019 to various line items in the AOC Juvenile Court Grant budget for 2022. J.P. Duncan.
That's a mouthful. I move we pass item number 15 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Motion to pass item number 15 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Wilson. Any further discussion? Public comments? I have a motion to pass item number 15 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Wilson. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 15 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 16, an ordinance recognizing additional revenue in the amount of $21,450 in the AOC Juvenile Court Grant Fund and appropriating $21,450 from the AOC Juvenile Court Grant Fund to various line items in the AOC Juvenile Court Grant budget for 2022.
I move we pass item number 16 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Motion to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan. Second by J.P. Ussery. Any further discussion? Public comments? Push the little man. Is there a little person or man? Yep, there you go.
Judge Diane Warren from Fayetteville, and just wanted to give some good news. These two items, this one and the one you just passed, are some of the surplus that the state had, came to us through the juvenile division of the AOC, and so we're going to make use of that in Division 8. We're going to use part of it to have a sensory board put up in the waiting room of the court for children who have to wait. That'll be part of it. Part of it is to purchase laptops for each of the juvenile officers so that they can enter their data into the data management system when they're out and about checking on their youth that they're supervising. And part of it we have for an art initiative, which is underway right now. We have youth who are supervised. We're partnering with a local artist. We're going to create art fixtures and use that to decorate the hallways of the court. So that's how we're going to spend this money, and we're thankful for the state to send it to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Warren. Public comments. All right. Item number 16, I have a motion to pass the full quorum court with due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Essery. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 16 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 17, an ordinance recognizing revenue in the amount of $135,259.70 in the FEMA COVID-19 Project Fund and appropriating $135,259.70 to the various line items in the FEMA Grant Fund for 2022.
Chairman, I move we pass item number 17 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Motion to pass item number 17 to the full quorum court with due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. Any additional discussion? Public comments? I have a motion to pass item number 17 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 17 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 18, an ordinance recognizing revenue in the amount of $120,091.37 in the FEMA COVID-19 Project Fund and appropriating $120,091.37 to the various line items in the FEMA Grant Fund for 2022. J.P. Duncan.
I move we pass item number 18 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
I have a motion to pass item number 18 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. Any further discussion? Public comments? I have a motion to pass item number 18 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Simons. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 18 will move to the full quorum court. 19. An ordinance anticipating revenues of $95,000 in the Arkansas Heritage Preservation Program Grant Fund and appropriating $95,000 to the other professional services line item in the AHPP budget for 2022-2023. J.P. Duncan.
I move we pass item number 19 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
Second. I have a motion to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Wilson. Any further discussion? Discussion. Public comments. I have a motion to pass item number 19 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Wilson. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 19 will move to the full quorum court. Item number 20. An ordinance establishing the Innovation Grant Fund and appropriating revenue from said fund to the other professional services line item in the Buildings and Grounds budget for 2022. Any discussion or motions? Chief of Staff Lester, do you have any comments on this one, or Director Gonzalez? Might need some background on this.
Yeah, this is a grant that's come to us that helped us put the solar chargers in over here at the courthouse. And so we need to finalize this so we can get those chargers up and running and get that going.
Okay. J.P. Duncan.
I move we pass item number 20 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
A motion to pass item number 20 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan. Second by J.P. Ussery. Any further discussion or questions? Public comments? I have a motion to pass item number 20 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Ussery. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That'll pass the full quorum court with a do pass recommendation. J.P. Duncan?
Chairman, I move we add items number 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 to the consent agenda for the quorum court meeting. All those passed unanimously. And I'll repeat that. It's items number 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Do I hear a second?
I have a motion. I have a motion to pass previously said items to the consent agenda by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Johnson. All those in favor? Those opposed? They will move to the consent agenda. Item number 21, an ordinance appropriating the amount of $545,140 from the unappropriated reserves of the general fund to the medical dental hospital line item in the ambulance service budget for 2022. Chief of Staff Lester, you want to give us some background on this? I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, so this is a supplement to funding for Central EMS. At a previous board meeting, the board met, which consists of all the mayors and the judge, and discussed the shortfall in funding that they've seen. They're seeing a pretty tremendous shortfall in funding. And so the board agreed that based on how we go ahead, how we share the costs of Central EMS on a pro rata basis to increase that amount to cover that shortfall. And so this is that amount to cover the shortfall to help fund Central EMS through the end of the year.
Any questions, comments, or motions? J.P. Duncan?
Chief of Staff Lester, is 2023 appropriately budgeted based on the increased cost?
Is it, do what now?
Is 2023 appropriately budgeted based on this increased cost?
It's hard to say. The increased cost is because, like anything else, COVID has hit them. The inflation increases in fuel. One thing that has been discussed, and I think will be voted on later by the board, is increasing the stipend or the pro rata amounts that we pay. I think there's a lot that kind of goes into that and to consider, but that's one thing the board is considering is an increase in what we pay per resident at this time. And so those things will come up to the board and they'll look at it. I mean, it's a big chunk for all the cities and certainly the county. And there's I would say that I believe there's probably going to have to be a really hard look at the future and what that looks like for Central moving forward, just given the cost associated with it and the issues they face from year to year. You know, we are fortunate here at the county. We project our budgets and we have the money that's there, and you appropriate that money, and so our staff knows they're going to be funded and they're going to get their salaries through the end of the year because that's been appropriated by the quorum court. With Central EMS, a lot of times it's month to month with them, and sometimes their staff doesn't know if they're going to be laid off or furloughed or if they're going to be able to make payroll by the end of the month. And so I don't think there's been a significant change in the funding in several years. And so there's just some long, hard, tough looks I think we're going to be looking at in the future, which is, you know, what is the future of Central EMS? I mean, as it stands now, they are the only medical emergency services provider in the county for the city of Fayetteville and all of the county except for Springdale, who has their own. And so this is kind of a trend that's being seen across the country on emergency services and having somebody to do that and to take care of that. So I think there's a lot up in the air right now, and I think that you'll be hearing more about it in the coming months once the board has had a chance to really look at their finances, which they're working on now, to see kind of what that looks like going forward.
So what options do we have? I mean, we can't not fund this, right? What's the...
I mean, you can not fund it, but I don't think anybody in the county is going to be in favor of that, or in the city. I mean, this is our ambulance provider. So there's a lot of things, you know, just some things I think it's best to wait till the board comes out and has a chance to look at it and determine what that looks like. But for now, it's the only game in town. And I'll be real honest, you know, it's not easy to find services like this. I mean, even private companies, it's not easy to find those for our market. It's not a big competitive market, which is why the county got with the cities and created Central EMS years ago. And so this is just one of the ways that we take care of our citizens. They do collect reimbursements, but like anything with any medical service, those reimbursements take time. There's a lot of, you know, it's not just a set amount. It's kind of like doctor's offices that have to go and have to call on insurance providers and try to get money, and then try to collect from people that don't have insurance to pay out of pocket, which is almost impossible. So certainly you don't want to deny any services, and you would never deny any services to people just because they couldn't pay in an emergency situation like that. But that's just kind of what we're looking at.
Move passage of item number 21 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation.
I have a motion to pass item number 21 to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, a second by J.P. Johnson. J.P. Lemming, we weren't cutting you off there, but if you still got a comment, I just want to get my motion down first.
Well, I just wanted to add a little bit more to what Brian was saying. Medicaid and Medicare has really hurt you a lot because they've changed the way they bill over the years. You know, COVID really hurt them a lot because when you'd go to their house, the hospital couldn't take anybody. So when you get there and you normally have a run that's worth about $1,000, and at the end of the day, they check them at home and they get $100 maybe. So that ambulance, when it runs out to a call like that, you know, you're paying your medics what you are and all that. Their fuel bill went from like $40,000 a month to like $100,000 a month. It was crazy because they was making them runs and wasn't being able to be paid back for any of that. I think personally myself, what's fixing to happen on the ambulance service is that we're going to have to set them up as their own entity, and we're going to have to take them in-house, and we're going to have to set them a budget just like anybody else. I think the county is going to have to really study that and look at that, but I think that's where it's going. We can't lose the ambulance service because that's, you know, they do a good job and they're trying hard, but it's a tough business to be in, and we can't be without them, period. So, you know, if we have to go to the people and even ask for a tax someday, we're going to have to do that. But I really believe that we're going to have to put them under our umbrella, and we're going to have to set them up a tax base and do it that direction. I think that's where we'll have to go with that eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chief of Staff, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I wasn't really going to go into that, but I agree. I think that's what the county's ultimately going to face, is looking at taking Central EMS in under the county for several reasons. And it won't cut off. It won't be that we won't get funding from the cities because they'll need those services as well. And the big city being Fayetteville, they do not have any interest in having their own ambulance service. The mayor has said that just because of the cost. And this is the best bang for the buck everywhere. But I think it's certainly something that the county's going to have to consider here in the near future on bringing Central EMS in as another department in the county. One is for budgeting purposes, because we have the ability to budget out for the year and then take those and help them with their revenues on collections and with the cities on helping with the funding. But you know, it's a very difficult place for these emergency service providers or emergency technicians, the dispatchers that we're already moving in now with the sheriff's office, to not know if they're going to get paid or not in some months. And it truly is that way, unfortunately, for them. And so we need them. I mean, I think every one of us wants an ambulance if something happens. And sometimes these guys are not knowing if they're going to get paid for that shift or not. So I do think that the quorum court and the county is going to have to really consider what that looks like and what we do to make sure we're taking care of our citizens. So I know that's a lot, and it's not anything we have to really look at right now, but that's certainly something that needs to be on the forefront of our minds as we move forward in talking about the services we provide to our citizens.
Fun stuff. Item number 21, public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment that Nick Robbins emailed to some of us last Thursday about the proposal to request an additional $1.6 million. And it was curious to me because he directed it seemingly at the Finance Committee, and I wrote him back and said, I'm not on the Finance Committee. And he said, that's because I've already pretty much talked to everyone on the Finance Committee. So what I don't understand is how he came here, not on the agenda, was added to the agenda, when clearly the proposal had been discussed with the majority of the committee before the agenda even came out. And you all seemingly have asked now to place an item on the agenda that was not on committee agenda, going to spend $1.6 million over multiple years, which I'm not sure is even feasible. But I think that the issue that concerns me the most is Magdalene Serenity House has been here multiple times to talk about the wonderful services they provide for women who are incarcerated in Washington County. And we have forced them to go through the application process for ARPA funding. But returning home gets this kind of special status that they don't have to go through that process. Because I asked Nick when he emailed last Thursday, did he fill out an application now that we have this ARPA process? And he said no, that the members of the committee had assured him that he didn't have to do that already. So I just want to explain that you all put an item on the agenda that wasn't on the published agenda, even though it had been discussed with the majority of the committee members before the agenda came out. And now you're proposing to spend $1.6 million on a nonprofit that is not subject to the same rules that every other nonprofit is. I urge you that if you're going to give this consideration to returning home where they get special treatment, please give it to the women as well. Thanks.
Public comments, preferably on the ambulance funding at this point.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear what you said.
We're still on item 21. We're going to have a public comment period for general
Okay, mine
concerns.
is not about the ambulance, so should I just wait then?
Would you mind?
I don't mind.
We'll take that up.
Thank you.
Any public comments about the ambulance funding? Okay. Item number 21, we have a motion to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by J.P. Duncan, second by J.P. Johnson. All those in favor? Those opposed? That item will move to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation. All right. Agenda item 22, 12-minute public comment period with a limit for 3 minutes per individual.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I got out of line there. My name is Beth Koger. I live at 3661 Embry Drive, Fayetteville, Arkansas. As I was saying a few minutes earlier, the $96,191 that we got from the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program grant, if you divide that by the approved beds of 5,348, that comes out to $18 per bed per day for which we receive payments. According to the Office of State Auditor, it cost us $96.34 to house a person in a Washington County Detention Center. And earlier, some $70 and something was mentioned, but now when I tried to get that amount from Attorney Brian Lester, he told me he did not remember having that conversation about that. So I don't know where they came up with that dollar figure, but according to the state auditor, it's $96.34. So that comes to, it would have cost us $515,226.32 to get the $96,000. And that doesn't include all the administrative time it took to keep records, submit information, prepare the grant, for costs that we incurred 3 years ago. It's a very time-intensive task for the Sheriff's Office, as detainees must meet multi-level criteria, and that data can be difficult to extract. And again, with very little return. But it's more than just dollars. As a speaker earlier spoke about working with the immigrant community, I work part-time. I'm actually retired, but I do work part-time for the only law firm in Arkansas that is a nonprofit that does exclusive work with just immigrants. That's the Arkansas Immigrant Defense. And I work with the immigrant communities. I've been out campaigning with the Marshallese communities and the Latinx communities within even every day this week except today. But I want to talk about how participating in this program erodes community trust and creates a two-tiered excuse me, two-tiered system of justice in which immigrants are treated differently in the criminal justice system. None of us should be okay with that. So I urge you to think about this, to vote against taking this money because of what we had to do to get these dollars. It's just not worth it. Families are broken apart and destroyed, and I don't want to be a part of that. Do you?
Thank you. Public comments.
Good evening, Josh Moody, Fayetteville. Thank you, Chair. If you head out here on Dixon, if you head west and then you head south on School, right there at the corner of School and Mountain, there's the Fayetteville Public Library. It's easy to get to from here or really anywhere. On Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock, there will be a forum hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. I want to personally invite you to that. I assume that you have been already, and I hope that you'll be there. They say 80% of success is just showing up. In fact, Assessor Hill tonight implied that 50% of his performance assessment is just showing up for his staff. I showed up tonight and invested 3 hours of my evening in order to make that personal invitation to you. Being an elected official means showing up for all people and having all people, providing all people the opportunity to hear from you if you hope to serve them. Now, I know that you're unable to meet those two opportunities last night, so I'm hoping third time's a charm. Chamber of Commerce. I hope that you're more comfortable with that environment than you would have been with the last two. I didn't pick the venue. I'd be happy to meet at the country club rather than the library. I really don't care where we meet. There's also a fourth opportunity. It'll be Thursday afternoon as well. It'll be later and I'll be happy to tell you about that more at the library. So hope to see you then. Hope that the people of Washington County have an opportunity to hear from you. Thank you very much. Y'all have a good evening.
Public comments.